People are no longer accepting being a woman as a diagnosis.
They normalize that that's just how it's supposed to feel. Your period is just painful. Cramps are awful. That's par for the course. Trying to deal with the egg issue, the stress issue, the anxiety issue, the gut issues. And then they feel like they're this ongoing project of never feeling finished or never feeling complete.
Even just talking about it exhausts me, right? I get their cortisol in check and all that goes away. Don't be afraid of symptoms. It's your body trying to tell you something, and you've just been ignoring it. Let the fear go around fertility, around aging, around perimenopause. Let it go.
Hello, and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, I am excited to be joined by an incredible guest. And I will say, if you are a woman, you need to be listening to today's episode. And I don't care how old you are, if you are a mom, if you're wanting to be a mom, maybe you don't want to have kids, maybe you want to better understand menopause and perimenopause and your hormones and your cycle and the things that you're experiencing with your health. We literally covered so much. I will genuinely say from the bottom of my heart, this episode is a complete masterclass on understanding yourself as a woman. Point blank, period. I have notes here because of just how much we covered. First of all, I want to say I am joined by the absolutely incredible Jessica Dupont, who is a naturopathic doctor and fertility and hormone strategist who specializes in women's health with a focus on functional medicine, detoxification, and fertility. Jessica is the founder and CEO of an online platform that also supports women through programs like Fertility Talks, Method, Egg Beauty Regimen, and Sperm Fitness. She's on a mission to reinvent how women experience their bodies and dispel the myths around women's health. And I will tell you, she did just that. Because there's so many things that even myself as a woman, I have felt at times where I'm like, I just have to deal with this. And this is just, what it means to be a woman, or this is just the reality of what I have to deal with. And she really did completely unpack all of that. And so I want to share with you a little bit of, in listening today, what you're going to take away. Number one, she talks about why we truly are living in a cortisol era and why chronically high cortisol is rewiring our brains to think that constant stress is actually normal. And she talks about the three major shifts that are happening in the landscape of women's health and what has changed over the last 10 to 15 years. We also talk about the truth of cycle syncing, which I asked about, and why you don't need to eat specific foods on certain days of your cycle, and what you actually want to understand about living with your cycle versus living linearly as a high achieving woman in your life and in your business. She also discusses her revolutionary approach of Fertility 3.0 and how it focuses on egg competence, not just egg count. And this part of this discussion broke my brain, especially as a woman who is 33 currently right now and does not have any children yet. She discusses why you can actually improve your egg quality in as little as 90 days. We discuss the critical difference between perimenopause symptoms and cortisol dysfunction, why 9 times out of 10 women in their 30s who think they're in perimenopause actually just need to be having their cortisol regulated, why being a woman is not a diagnosis, and what's actually going on behind those painful periods, missing cycles, and the symptoms that your doctor is constantly brushing off as quote unquote normal. And we talk about the uterine environment piece that fertility clinics are often ignoring, including the bacteria that causes recurring miscarriages and why most clinics are not even testing for it. I will tell you, I've interviewed a lot of guests on this show, and many of them inspire me. But this episode was so deeply educational, moving, inspiring. I left feeling so deeply empowered, even in my own health, to just really realize that I have a lot more control over the feeling of my health, the reality of my health, the experience of it, and the future of it as a result of this information today. So I don't want to keep you any longer. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, I am so excited for today's conversation because we are joined by the incredible Jessica, and we're going to be talking about all things women's health. So, Jessica, first of all, welcome to Ambitious. Welcome to the show.
I am so excited to be here. This is going to be such a great conversation, and I am so blessed and honored to be in your presence and talking to your guests, and very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. I honestly, even in prepping questions I wanted to ask you, I'm gonna be honest, I had like 3 pages. I was like, okay, like hormones, fertility, egg quality, I was like, I have so many things. So this is probably gonna go a million different ways. And I just maybe to start, because with all those topics, there's so much to dive into. For the woman that's listening, what would you say is kind of going to be the biggest impact of that conversation for her today? Meaning, if she is going to listen and tune into this, what's, I guess, the biggest impact you've seen, maybe even just with your clients, of why education and knowledge around this is really like super crucial for women, especially for those who are listening who are very high achieving, fast paced living type of women as well?
Yeah. So I think I understand your question where you're asking, like, what is going to be kind of the biggest takeaway that they take
Yeah.
away from the conversation today? And I think the biggest thing is recognizing that our bodies are always talking to us. I find that a lot of women, we blame our hormones. We are always looking for a quick fix or what's wrong with us. And instead of looking at things that way, we should look at things from a broader perspective. So, especially for high achieving women, those of us who go, go, go all day, we work, we mother, we do all the things,
Yeah.
we're sleep deprived and everything like that.
Yeah.
We need to look at, instead of, what's wrong with us and what do we need to fix, we need to look at what we're up against, right? Because
Mhm.
the landscape for women's health has really shifted in the last 10, 15 years, and we can dive into that as well. But what I want women to take home today is that instead of trying to fix, instead of trying to constantly question our bodies and blame hormones, we more so need to look at it as a communicator, right? And that our bodies are always trying to tell us something. And often we just
Yeah.
ignore it, we push through it, right? We push through
Mhm.
the stress, we push through the anxiety. We go like hours without eating or going to the bathroom when our bodies are telling us it needs
Yeah.
to. And
Yeah.
eventually our bodies listen, right? And then it begins to fall apart and those messages become louder and louder and louder. And at some point they're going to become so loud that you have no choice but to listen. So
Mm.
those little things that your body is trying to tell you, you need to get quiet and really listen and reflect, because that's where the root cause lies and that's where your healing will start, instead of just throwing on band-aid solutions and trying to fit and blaming everything else. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah, what
So
I think I take from that for me is like, I think as women, we're so focused on what is the symptom we're experiencing.
mhm,
So like if the symptom being indigestion, the symptom being, for some people that I know that have like endometriosis or PCOS, they have like awful painful periods. It's just like this is the symptom I'm trying to get rid of, versus what I take from that is like, really, if you understand the symptom or understand the system, sorry, you'll understand what the symptom is kind of coming back to your point of root cause.
right.
So you mentioned like things have changed a lot for women in the last several years. And this is something that I talk about a lot, because I think in the business sense, because I think that women started working. And when they started working, there wasn't really this like reshifting
Mhm,
of the system of like society, responsibilities, pressure. So, like, previous to women deeply getting into the workplace, there was this like women were at that time, through like kind of, roles within the home, like the homemaker.
mhm,
And then women started working, many of which full time. And now they're working full time, but none of those responsibilities necessarily dissipated. It was more just something got added on, but nothing got subtracted. And so when I think about women's health, especially during that kind of, I guess, area, I think about there became even less space. There was already less space. Like when someone's just, even if you think about just the title of homemaker as a job and as a responsibility, that in itself is a full capacity to hold, on top of potentially being in a relationship, being a partner, and then
mhm.
add on top of that a full-time job. You think, okay, there was already such little space for her before, and now that space became even smaller. So from where I look from the business lens, it, from a I guess circumstance perspective, makes a lot of sense why women might feel like they're struggling, to your point earlier, of trying to manage a home, a relationship, a business, potentially a career. But for you, in what you do with women, what have you seen, I guess, as like the domino or the impact of that?
Yes. Yeah. So I feel everything you're saying right now. And it's almost like when you list all the things, when you list the, oh, she's a homemaker, she's making meals for her kids, then she goes to work and she pushes herself, and then she comes home and she does it all over again. And we really don't get to rest until, maybe 9:30 at night, and then we're just wiped at that
Yeah.
point. Even just talking about it exhausts me, right? It's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like we do so much. And the change that we've seen is sort of threefold over the last 10 to 15 years. So, and like I said, the landscape has really shifted. So, like you said, there's a lot more pressures on women now. We are living in an environment of more linear productivity when, as women in general, our bodies are designed for more cyclical nature, monthly, changes, and we're more designed for rest and communication and community, right? Which is very opposite from that
Right.
linear productive line, which is sort of that masculine
Yeah.
produce.
Yeah.
And so there are times during the month where, especially during our cycle around ovulation, around those times when testosterone is high and estrogen is high, we feel great. We feel vibrant. We feel like we can go on podcasts and we can,
Mhm.
do presentations. And that's the best time to do that. But then
Yeah.
there's also times where we should be listening to our bodies and resting and eating more warming foods and not taking on too much and maybe just finishing up tasks, not pushing ourselves at the gym. And so we're just so far from that now, right? So
Mhm.
that's one part of it. And then the whole other piece is what I call the cortisol era. I really feel like we're in this cortisol era now where we have almost rewired our brains to have high cortisol as baseline, right? So
Mhm.
our bodies ideally should be able to adapt to stress very easily. And, as stressful situations come, we are able to handle it. Our cortisol goes up, but as, situations subside, so does our cortisol. But we're in this phase of pushing, pushing, pushing. And so we're resonating at high cortisol all the time. We're constantly in a sympathetic state. So our body is in fight or flight. And when our body is in fight or flight, all that blood flow goes to the periphery, right? So it goes to our hands and our feet to help us run away from the attack. And it goes
Yeah.
to all of the organs that are necessary for survival. So our heart to pump more blood, our brain, and oxygen and everything like that. It does not go to our digestive system and reproductive organs, right? Because the last thing that your
Mhm.
body is thinking about when it's under
Yeah.
attack is producing a
Yeah.
baby or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's this huge brain gut and ovary connection as well that's become disrupted. The last piece of what has changed huge in the last 10, 15 years, even in the last 20 years, 30 years, is toxins and chemicals in our environment. And especially in our skincare products, in plastics, in fragrances, and everything else, these chemicals are mimicking our hormones. And they're causing a major disruption in the way we metabolize insulin, um, the way our thyroid functions, the way we produce estrogen. It could actually cause more estrogen in the body or less, and it causes a major gut disruption. And so these three things have really shifted how our health is changing, right? And so it is sort of a systemic thing in, political and all of that, but also
Yeah.
very much in our environment, the physical changes that are happening. And so, like I said before, it's less about what's wrong with us and more about look what we're up against, right? And when women realize what they're up against, they go, holy cow, look what I can
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
right? The nice thing that's happening now is you're seeing more of a shift into people talking about women's health, especially in the perimenopause space. I think that that has really come to light in the fertility space as well. We are recognizing endometriosis and PCOS far more. People are no longer accepting being a woman as a diagnosis, right? We
Yeah.
are no longer accepting unexplained infertility or that, well, you're going through menopause, so this is just what you're going to deal with. Women are tired. They're tired of being pushed aside. They're tired of being told that things are normal or there's nothing wrong with them when they can clearly feel that something has changed. So the conversation is changing, which I think is great. And because of that, people are now putting more research behind these things. Like they think they finally did a study on women and how much women need sleep, where, the studies around, the whole 7-8 hours of sleep
Yes.
was all done
All centered around
on
men.
men. And then they finally did one on women. Then they're going, oh, women actually need like 9 to 10 hours of sleep. And I went, I'm not broken, because my entire life I've always said, I don't feel rested unless I have 10 hours. And and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like,
Right.
And now I'm like, it all makes sense. And it's just because how much energy we need for all of those cyclical changes happening throughout the month.
Well, I think even as you explain like those 3 buckets, which is basically like syncing of your life with the realities of your cycle. And then also with that, looking at the aspect of like the external factors and those 3 buckets. I feel like for any woman listening to that, they go, do I even have a fighting chance of feeling great? Right? Because you just think about, as to your point earlier, how much you're up against. You feel like you already have very probably little capacity or energy or time to dive into your health, because maybe depending on, where you're at in your life, some women listening are just starting their families, growing their families, wanting to start a family. So you think, I'm already feeling so stretched, and now I have to think about environmental factors, my timeline of like cycling my life with my cycle and like tuning in and allowing my body space. But I want to have a family, so I'm trying to push to prepare, and there's like all of this outside pressure, right? So I think what would be great is to almost dive into helping the woman listening to say, okay, like what can I understand so that I feel empowered to be able to take action in these areas? Because when you said for the first bucket, aligning our kind of cycles to our life, I felt, to be honest, very triggered initially.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I live that linear life. Okay. So I am always like, I don't have time to not be, like, to your point earlier, you're pushing in the gym, you're pushing in work. I had this debate actually with a friend the other day, because they said, is cycle syncing real? Like, in the sense of, is it just like an Instagram phenomenon, or is this something that would really be like a game changer for women? And that's the instant thing that I thought of, which is that I think so many women feel maybe frustrated by the fact that they have to quote unquote slow down. And they think, okay, to your point, I'm just going to push through. I'm just going to work through it. I'm just going to do the workout anyways, get on the podcast, push in business that week. But based off what you're saying, that actually might be doing us more harm than just pushing through.
So I see where, and it, you know what, I feel the same way, because you almost feel stuck, that you go, well, what am I supposed to do? It's not like you can change this linear landscape. The thing is, we are, like I said, we've rewired our brains to think that surviving at high cortisol is the normal, right? And for some women, especially high achieving women, it's not realistic to slow down, like you said. And that's okay. I think that, yes, we are in general looking at, we do cycle, and there are times in our month where our hormones are fluctuating, and that might make us feel more tired and not want to do something, but we do it anyway and things like that, which is okay, right? What we don't want is to get to the point of burnout, where you have, and I work a lot with high achieving women, right? And what we see a lot is very high anxiety, very high expectations on themselves, which is all things that we work through as well. And understanding that it's okay to push yourself if you need to push yourself. And it's okay to take rest when you need times of rest. And then just making sure that you're making time for both, that you're making time for self, but you're also making time for business. And you'll notice too, even, as an entrepreneur yourself, there are ebbs and flows, right? There are times in business when you need to go, like you're launching something, or you're pushing out, say 12 podcasts in the next 3 months. And there are times when your body will tell you, or your brain will tell you, it's just time to slow down right now. And that's when you listen. So it doesn't mean you have to listen every week of your cycle, right? And sometimes the universe will naturally provide. Like, I even find in my clinic, there'll be times when I'm very, very busy. Like, I have months waiting lists, and I'm pushing. And then there'll be other times where my week completely spaces out. I have a lot of cancellations, a lot of people reschedule, and I go, why? Like, my inner body goes to, I panic, and I begin to self-judge. I'm like, wait. But then I recognize, I'm like, wow, what the universe is really trying to tell me is that I need this time of rest. And maybe it's not long, maybe it's just a week or something like that. But I really started to value that time of just recognizing when I needed it. So I think it's more about just self-awareness. And I don't think that women need to be focused on eating a certain way at different times in their cycles. Again, because also there's stressors and chemicals and other things involved that are going to affect
Mm,
digestion aside from hormones, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Even with workouts, what we want to try to avoid is if somebody is already sort of in that adrenal, and I don't want to use the word adrenal fatigue because that's not a real thing, more of a dysregulated cortisol pattern, right? Where maybe they're waking up feeling fatigued, they're getting an afternoon slump in energy, they're overwhelmed very easily by simple, small things. They're waking up at night. So you could tell the adrenal glands and
Yeah.
cortisol are not regulated. That's where I begin to have conversations with my high achieving clients or women in my practice where I say, something's got to give, right?
Mm,
Or else your body's going to. So
yeah.
so we begin to think about looking at that person as an individual and just being like, okay, we're not expecting perfection here, but what small changes can we make that are not going to overwhelm you? You know what I mean? So is it
Yeah.
that you just need to eat more frequently, right? And
Mm,
making sure you're getting more protein in your meals to stabilize your blood sugar? Is it that we need to focus on your sleep and just making sure you're sleeping well so that cortisol isn't spiking at night? Do we need to start some adrenal
yeah.
herbs? What can we do to help you cope throughout this time where you're push, 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 right? Which again, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I get in those stages too where I want to push. I want to succeed in business. We're high achieving women. We love that and we thrive on that. So it's about what little small changes could you make that's not going to
Mm.
overload you. Does that make
Well, I
sense?
think
Did I
it's like
answer
the
your
unique.
question? I feel like maybe
No,
I went on
totally.
a tangent around that.
No, 100%, because I think that for me, I thought about it like you were saying earlier, like, I think people think working with your hormones or working with your body means like week 1 of the month, you're gonna do
Mm,
this. Week 2 of the month, this is what you're doing in your workouts. During your luteal phase, this is what you're gonna be doing. And I think that sometimes for people, they think that's just so overwhelming. And to
yeah.
your point, it's not always considering life factors or schedule factors or just like circumstance factors. When you think, okay, luteal phase, we're just going to kind of allow our body to rest and
Mhm.
understand what our body needs in that moment. And by fluke, during your luteal phase in your business, you happen to need to launch a product that week. And so you
No.
think, okay, these two things don't seem to align. So I think that many women, because of that, with cycle syncing, to think about it as a schedule, I
Hmm.
think is tricky. But what I'm hearing you say is it's less about the schedule and it's more about tuning in to the feeling within your body and basically listening to what your body needs and trying to mesh that with your current reality to give it as much support as possible. Because even what you mentioned of the cortisol, actually, I had a couple years ago a really bad spout of burnout. And I thought, okay, I had massive indigestion, awful acne, couldn't sleep, awful anxiety, just like constant bloating. Like the symptoms were just like flaring. And I remember she said, okay, well, how do you feel at night when you go to bed? I'm like, oh, I'm wired. I could stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
She goes, how do you feel like when you wake up though? I was like, I'm exhausted because I'm exhausted all day until nighttime. And then I was working till 2 o'clock in the morning because I would have so much energy. And so she talked about, like you were saying, the reverse cortisol of like your cortisol kind of flow and pattern is completely out of sync. So basically, we need to get your body back into a rhythm. So here I am thinking, what supplement do I take? What, you know what I mean? Do I get an IV? Like I tried to think about all these things that I could do that are just like, again, remove the symptom versus asking, like, what is the actual systemic
Mhm.
root of what's coming up? So for these women that obviously, the avatar, just as I do very well, and even for ourselves, probably fall into this bucket in some moments in life, the aspect of cortisol for the person who feels like I don't understand or know anything about cortisol, where can we start with understanding that and really how that impacts us as women,
Yeah.
since most of us are living in fairly stressful states, probably most days?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So cortisol is a hormone, right? And it's secreted by our adrenal glands. So there are these tiny glands that sit on top of the kidneys. They're about the size of I guess, an almond. And they pump out cortisol and adrenaline under times of stress. So cortisol is not a bad hormone. A lot of people fear the word cortisol. And we do
Mm,
talk about it a lot in the sense that we have too much or sometimes too little. but it is wonderful at regulating so many different parts of our body. Cortisol helps our circadian rhythm at night and our sleep patterns. It helps us digest our food. It helps us metabolize, and it's helps manage weight control. It helps manage our blood pressure in a roundabout way as well, and even our thyroid. So when we think of hormones, I like to imagine them as a spider web, right? So if you had all your hormones on a spider web, if you pluck the end of the web, the whole web will shake, right? And so even if cortisol is too high one day or too little, all the other hormones will begin to recalibrate to kind of like help you not feel so unwell, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
cortisol will do the same thing. So when you're under times of stress, so say you get stuck in traffic, cortisol will go up naturally to help you cope with that stress so you're not so overwhelmed. And then naturally, as traffic clears, this cortisol will come down. And so cortisol has this natural curve that it follows. So it's supposed to be lowest at night, which helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. And then it's supposed to spike in the morning, which helps us be alert and wake and have energy. And then it will fluctuate throughout the day. Now, when your adrenal glands are healthy, you're not feeling major impacts by those acute stresses. Your body is able to handle those stresses very easily. When we move into times of more chronic stress, so even if it's a 2-week window of time, we sort of move into what I call the CEO type pattern, where it's like go, go, go all day long. We're drinking coffee to keep us functioning,
Yeah.
and then we crash at
Yeah.
night, which is kind of exactly the opposite of what you were experiencing at the burnout phase. So we're going to
Mhm.
get to that in a minute. But before burnout, we're driving cortisol, go, go, go. We're in a sympathetic state and we're pumping out all this cortisol to keep us functioning. Because by the time you feel maybe that stress is coming down, it's like, oh, there's more stress. Oh, there's more stress. We get a text from somebody that triggers something in us, and then something at work is not going well, and then the kids are screaming. And so
Yeah.
we're just in this constant state of high cortisol. And then what happens eventually is the cortisol curve, like you said, shifts, right? So now what happens is we have cortisol spiking at night when it should be lowest, which now we're wired. So we call it the wired and tired type. And then we also have it spiking in the middle of the night, normally around, I would say 3 in the morning. You'll see I have people all the time come in and be like, well, I'm waking at night. And I go, oh, does it happen to be around 3 a.m.? And they go, yes, how do you know that? And that's just because it's the time of the liver, it's the
Yeah.
stress piece. So cortisol is spiking and waking you at night or keeping you not going into a nice deep sleep. And then cortisol is low in the morning. So now instead of waking up and having energy, you're waking feeling fatigued. And then it slumps in the afternoon as well. So normally around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, you're either needing a nap or reaching for a cup of coffee. And then over time, what happens is if we don't take care of that right away, so if we're not putting the right boundaries in place, we're not saying no, right? So that's something I'm learning is I'm a big people pleaser.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
say yes to everybody and I give out so much energy and I'm
Yeah.
not taking enough in. And, as women, we need to remember that we're semi-permeable membranes. As much energy as we're giving out, we need to take in that same amount or we're going to reach something called burnout, which we use that term loosely. It's not a medical term, right? So it's not like it's a medical diagnosis. However, chronically over time, what happens is the adrenal glands begin to slow down. We're not pumping out as much cortisol as we need. So it's almost like you're a high functioning woman and you've been in this state for a long period of time. Your body is used to pumping out high cortisol, right? So now the adrenal glands are going, I need to find ways to make more cortisol to keep her.
Mm.
So it starts picking up your hormones to do that. Okay. It picks up
Mhm.
testosterone to start
Okay.
driving up more cortisol. So now we start to see shifts in our menstrual cycle where we have a more painful cycle that month, or the period goes missing altogether. And we're like, where did my period go? Or why is it a week late? Why is it more heavy? Why is it more painful? This is weird. And that's normally aligns with the time of chronic stress. So other hormones begin to shift. We might start to see the thyroid become under functioning as well. And so metabolism changes. Women start gaining weight, or, they're not getting the gains at the gym that they were getting before. Sleep patterns have completely dysregulated. They're used to being up all night. Anxiety is through the roof. We even start seeing depression in these women and an extreme fatigue to the point of almost like nothing will pull them out of it. Even if you were to start adrenal herbs, you're like, this is just not working at this point. And this is where you start to see cellular energy begin to decline. So the mitochondria become damaged, right? So we can get into that as well. But so this is the problem. This is what we're trying to avoid, is getting to that point where women are so overwhelmed that even something slight happens and they're, pulling their hair and going, oh, I can't handle this. Right. And I've been there. I've definitely been there to the point where I was experiencing rage. Like I did not feel like myself. It was always happening after, the luteal phase or in the luteal phase of my cycle when hormones were already starting to shift. And my progesterone was way too low. I was breastfeeding. My cortisol was really high. And so I remember I would get to that point in my cycle and tell my husband, just prepare yourself.
Steer clear.
And it felt out of my control. Do you know what I mean? We were snappy, irritable, and it just felt, you just weren't yourself. And it was something you couldn't control. And so this is what we're trying to avoid. And this is what we're trying to pull women out of now, because I literally feel like 90% of my female patients are coming in with those same symptoms. So these same patterns, right?
I think that's so empowering though, because even as you're talking about that, I'm like, oh, it's so good. Because I think like when I had anxiety, they were like, okay, let's deal with the anxiety. Or when I had like, to your point, one of the ways that it showed up for me, it was weight gain, but it was also the inability to lose weight. No matter how much I tracked food, how many steps I got, it was like my body was just holding on to literally everything.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, like maybe I have like candida, like maybe there's like a gut thing going on. And then there was a separate anxiety conversation happening, thinking, oh, well, maybe you just need anti-anxiety or you need more meditation techniques or mindfulness techniques. There was never really, to your point, which I know is kind of the heart of what you talk about and what you help people with, this assessing of the system to understand, is there possibly a root that is literally interconnected to your point of the web that is partially responsible for all of this happening? And it was interesting because as soon as I started to, at that time, work a lot on getting blood work to understand where my hormones were, looking at overall my cortisol and trying to shift that and like really being intentional about those pieces, that was the only time that the acne then started to go away. But at the time I thought, okay, do I need a different moisturizer? Is it the cleanser I'm using? It was always so segmented. And so I remember at the time when I thought, I felt really, to your point, not myself. I felt very sick in just all these buckets. I thought, okay, I have anxiety, I've gained weight, I have this acne, I'm constantly bloated. I can't go to the washroom to save my life. I was in like constant pain. So I was like, okay, this just does not feel like something's obviously happening. Nobody ever said to me, hey, like, tell me about your schedule. Like, nobody ever asked that question of the systemic piece. It was always segmented. So it was only actually once I went to a naturopath who I actually think Tara in Toronto. Yeah, recommended by Jeremy. So I went to her, and it was only once I started working with her that I actually started to uncover some of these pieces. So you mentioned the web analogy, I think is so good, because this one piece gets pulled and it kind of rocks the entire web. Now, for the person listening, they might think, okay, well, I have always had issues with my periods. Or I've always had potentially, maybe they have PCOS or they have endometriosis. When there's so much of this information, because I think to your point, us as women, we're very critical of our bodies and just like of our symptoms and what we're experiencing. How do you start to, I guess, triage if someone is feeling things are just not quite right, or even for yourself in that example, and you're like, okay, something's off here. I'm feeling like I am more irritable, more so than usual. How do you kind of triage where to start? Because I would imagine for someone who's feeling not themselves, whether it is indigestion, it could be skin, it could be stress, it could be hormones, their cycle, it can feel overwhelming. And so I'm curious as to like, how does someone kind of triage where to start with themselves, or maybe with their body, or with someone like yourself, to start to dive into this, to say, okay, I want to take back care of my health. This is where I need to kind of look first.
Yes, great question. So the first question I always ask everyone is, when did this all start? And what started first, right? Because it seems like you said, oh, there's the digestion piece and then the mental health piece, and I can't sleep and I have headaches and I have all these different things happening, all these different symptoms happening. But we have to kind of pull it all together and be like, where did this all begin? And then what sort of was impacted because of that trigger? So when we go back to when I ask that question, usually they say, oh, 5 years ago. They usually use like a timeline, right? And then I say, okay, what was happening in your life around that time? So often people will say, well, I had a baby, or we had a lot of stress in our life. We were beginning our business, or we were moving. There was always some kind of stressor. For others, it could be a physical stress where it was, oh, I got in an accident, or I had a concussion. I had a really bad bout of parasites, or I had a viral infection. Viruses we know trigger a lot of different reproductive disorders, even thyroid. Or it could be something like in childhood that they don't remember, right? So it might be, oh, yeah, I had constipation starting from when I was a kid, and I don't even remember what that was from. So it could even have been like a past trauma, which is hard to get to if they don't remember. But as children, I ask questions around, well, what did your dad do? What did your mom do? Did they work in automotive industry? Were you around lead paint? Mercury thermometers? Did you grow up on a farm? So I start to dive into potential mold exposure or chemical exposure, heavy metals, and how that all could have triggered things as well. And then from there, we look into how things have progressed, so what symptoms have came next, and then also family history, right? So you're telling me you have painful periods. Do you have sisters that also have painful periods? Did your mom experience any fertility issues? And then they go, oh yeah, my mom had a miscarriage before she had me, and or she had her uterus removed, but I don't remember why, right? And we're going, okay, so potential
Yeah.
endometriosis or fibroids or uterine cancer or things like that. So estrogen dominance becomes a trigger in my brain. And so it really just becomes about the history. And sometimes that's difficult if you're not working with somebody that's asking you the right questions. So, like you said, you didn't know until you met with a naturopath, and then she started asking you questions, and you go, oh, I never even thought of that. Or I have women coming in, maybe they're having issues with their cycles, and they don't even think that digestion is an issue or sleep is an issue until I start asking them questions about it. And they go, oh, yeah, I only do have bowel movements once every 2 days. Or, oh, yeah, I do feel anxious at that last half of my cycle. Or, they don't even realize it until you ask the questions. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, anything hormonal is a symptom. It's not root cause. It's just a communicator. Our hormones are communicating to us. Our hormones are trying to actually fix us. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. The root
Yeah.
cause is usually always rooted into either some trauma experience. So whether that's emotional or physical, and it's about trying to figure out which one it is. So is it an emotion now manifesting itself into something physical, right? Or was there a virus or heavy metal exposure or genetic component here that you've been up against and just haven't known it? And so then we
Mhm.
go into, I kind of work intuitively as well. Like I start to talk to patients, I feel things in my body, and it's almost like an intuitive thing where I go, I think this is the root. And 9 times out of 10, I am right in terms of usually it's around the liver and the liver being bogged down and cortisol, right? But other people, it's different things. But like, for
And I
example,
wondered, do you think that we as women, like when you were saying with the cycle,
mhm,
I think that there's also this cultural piece that we kind of normalize this like coffee in the morning. Like you think about, okay, the classic thought of like how a mom wakes up and it's like coffee. Like it's like the first thing they drink is coffee on an empty stomach, right? Or on the contrast, there's the kind of this like, running joke of like, oh, I'm in my luteal phase, like don't kind of thing, don't start because I'm irritable.
yes.
And I also wonder if for you, you see that people, I guess, normalize some of
Mhm.
the quote unquote symptoms or normalize the situations that they're experiencing because they believe whether it's from society or just like modern culture or, potentially their surroundings of people they're surrounded with, that they normalize that that's just how it's supposed to feel. Your period is just painful. Cramps are awful. That's par for the course. Or, your luteal phase, that's where you're irritable. So like if you're irritable during that week, that's how it's supposed to be. It's not cause for concern. Like I wonder if there's almost a piece of this too where women are minimizing the symptoms strictly based off the fact that like culture or society has kind of indirectly, unintentionally told them that this is how it's supposed to be. So as a result, they live that way
Mhm.
for a very long time under the assumption that's just how it is. And I had a girlfriend of mine who just discovered she's 27 and she has had like debilitating taking time off work, awful, awful, awful cycles, and thought, okay, this is just how it is. Like cramps suck, periods
Yeah.
suck. And I said, you really need to go get it checked out. Goes to get it checked out, come to realize she has
Yeah.
endometriosis. So she was like, the amount of years that I struggled with this, just thinking people around me saying I was being dramatic, just take a Midol, like, those types of situations, come to find out there's this deeper thing going on. I also wonder, maybe do women come to you sometimes later than they should because they normalize that this is just, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. This is being a woman type thing.
Yes. Oh, I love that you're bringing this up because it's triggering too, because I feel for these women. I was one of those women, right? And, especially when I see teenagers come in and they're on birth control pills for acne, right? And I'm going,
Mhm.
but do you even know what the root cause of your acne is, right? And look, why are we
Right.
giving your body hormones for that? And or, their doctors are putting them on birth control pills for painful periods. And they're here and they're asking me questions, which is so wonderful. And I go, listen, I understand birth control has its place, but what if there's something underlying going on here with your cycle? You're telling me you've had painful periods your whole life, lots of clotting, heavy periods. That's very difficult to normalize now that you're on the pill, number one.
Yes.
But now
Yeah.
what happens if you're on the pill for 10 years, you come off, you try to get pregnant, and now you can't? Not because the pill made you not able to conceive, but because there was an underlying condition that was masked, right?
Mm.
And now getting worse over time, especially with PCOS women who they have irregular cycles. And so doctors put them on birth control to regulate the cycle. They think they're having a period every month and things are going great. And then they come off the
Right.
pill and they go, where's my period? I'm not ovulating. What do you mean I'm not ovulating? So, and that's
Mm.
just a piece of it. But a lot of women do think that what they experience is normal because they're told it's normal. And it's funny you say being a woman is not a diagnosis, because that is literally the first quote I have on my homepage of my website. Being a woman is not a
Yeah.
diagnosis. We are just told these things because I don't think they know how to deal with it. Really, I don't. It's under
Yeah.
investigated. The research is not there. And I have even met physicians that they won't test patients' hormones, because I always wonder, why aren't they testing your hormones? And they're testing them on the completely wrong day of their cycle. So I'm like, you have to go back and test it again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and then they go, well, I'm not testing it because I don't know how to interpret the results. And I appreciate when they're very
Mm.
honest with me about that. And I go, I love that you say that. And I love that you tell your patients that, because many times when you say, I'm not testing your hormones, they feel like they're not heard or
Yeah.
understood, and they feel like they're being brushed off. But if you're honest and you say, well, I don't really know much about hormones, why don't I refer you to somebody who does? That's a better, physician patient interaction, right? That
Yeah.
creates more of a trust and an understanding between a patient and their physician versus just being brushed off. The conversation is changing. You will see a lot less teenagers and less women going on birth control. You will see women coming off birth control to just understand what their hormones and their cycles actually look like. But it is interesting. I ask women all the time, well, how's stress? And I could tell just by the way they're talking very quickly. They're moving in their seats.
Yeah.
They're, very type
Yeah.
A personalities, very high
Yeah.
functioning women. And they go, well, stress is there, but I'm fine. I know how to deal with it. I'm good. And I go, okay. And then we start asking questions about, okay, how are you sleeping?
She's like, I'm gonna
How
dig
are you?
deeper.
And let me
Yeah.
dig a little deeper here. And then I go, you know what? Why don't we just try some adrenal support? Try these little changes in your schedule or with your sleep. And then they come
Yeah.
back to me, a month later and they go, oh my God, I was just living under stress for so long. I thought this was my normal. And now I feel
Mhm.
like I'm more relaxed and I can just deal with life better and I'm not so agitated. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize that this was normal. And I can relate
Yeah.
to that, right? Like I
Yeah.
thrive, what I would call thrive on stress, right? Until
Thrive under
until you
pressure.
don't though, until you
Yeah.
don't, like I got to that point of rage and I went, nope, this is not working anymore, right?
And I think you don't know until you experience the alternative. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't even realize how I couldn't function that way now if I tried, because I feel like now I've
Mm,
tasted the other side and I physically, my body won't let me go back.
mhm.
But I remember, like, the pattern of starting to actually get into rhythm and having a nighttime routine and being conscious of the foods that I was eating and like capping my caffeine. I used to have 4 coffees a day. Now I have 1 a day and that's it. And so, like, trying to be conscious of those things now, knowing how my body feels versus how it felt before. I thought, how was I even functioning? Like, I
Yeah.
wasn't even drinking water. I was literally a desert. I don't know how I was functioning. And so I think too, your aspect of cycles, and this is something that I really would love to dive into because there's a couple pieces. For the woman that's listening, she's either thinking about starting her family, she's either currently trying to start a family and or growing her family. And I think one of the things that I know is kind of the core of what you do with women as well is talking about egg quality and also
Mhm.
talking about fertility. And I'm thinking about the person who's go, 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 who is going a million miles an hour and yet also potentially is frustrated by her fertility. Because for just in my current circle, and I'm curious to see what you have seen just in the women's space, it seems to me, and I'm not sure if it's just more talked about or if it's actually more prevalent today, it seems that there's more women having trouble with starting their families or with just conceiving in general. So, like, I talked
Mhm.
to someone yesterday and it had taken them 7 years. They ultimately did conceive naturally, which was amazing, but it was after a lot of intentional hormone work and stress work and all of that. And basically came to this place of their cycle and their health on a deep level, on that system level. They're like, I never paid attention to any of that. I thought, okay, just keep trying. It's just about tracking when we try and having the date specific and all of these things without realizing, to your point, like the stress impact that was happening, how sleep was impacting. And there was never a conversation they shared yesterday with egg quality. Like, there was never, it was just, okay, I'm going to start my family later because she had been focusing on her career. And then there was this
Mhm.
frustration of, if I had known it was going to be this hard, I would have started a lot earlier.
Yeah.
So there's just, I think, a lot within that, especially for women who are focusing on their career. Even for myself, I wouldn't say I worry, but I definitely, in seeing so many of my peers and friends who have struggled in this bucket, I worry, okay, like, if I'm 33 right now and I put this off, if I was to struggle, for example, for like 2, 3 years, what would that mean? Like, yes, you could still, hopefully, God willing, still be able to conceive. But I think for people like myself, there's also this aspect of, how can I use this time
Mhm.
to take really intentional care of my body to make sure I'm doing everything that I possibly can to support for like that era. So, all of that to say, I would be curious as to, what is it that you want women to know about their cycles, and how does that impact, egg quality, fertility, all of those pieces? Because it's shocking to me, there's also a lot of women who don't even know what the phases of a
I know.
cycle
I
are
know.
in their 30s. So I was like, this is also not talked about a lot, I feel like, as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Oh, you touched on so many good things. But you are right in the sense it's actually both that, we're seeing more fertility struggles because it is higher now because of, our lifestyle, the cortisol era. Women are trying later as well because
Mhm.
of careers, and there's more chemicals in the environment as well. So there's a lot of causes that are driving up the infertility rates, even especially even in men, right? We forget to talk about men, but it's 50-50.
Yes.
And then there's also this piece of that we are talking about it more, which is great. But again, it is one of those things that we're told, well, infertility is like normal now, right? But
Mm.
it's not normal, it's common, right? Like, let's be careful with our
Mhm.
language. And also that miscarriage is normal, which I hate hearing that. And often, doctors will tell people that, well, infertility clinics won't even look at you until you've had 3 consecutive miscarriages or 3 miscarriages in your lifetime. And that
Oh,
I feel is
wow.
also wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, if you've had one, then we're figuring out why before you even start trying again.
Mhm.
So, going back to us not even knowing about our cycles, it wasn't talked about. Like, even when I was a child, my mother never had a conversation with me about my period. we looked at periods as something we didn't want, right? It was dirty. It was gross. It happened once a month and that was it. Then we never had to worry about our hormones and our cycles, right? Just that week of
Yeah.
bleeding and that's it. And then we're done.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
also meant to believe that we can get pregnant at any time, right?
Yeah.
So every day you can get pregnant, which is also very false. And we're also
Yeah.
meant to believe that we can get pregnant like this, right? At an
Mhm.
instant. So then when women come off birth control, or maybe they weren't on birth control, but they start trying for a family and they're not getting pregnant like this, they go, what is going on? Why? What's wrong? Then now the panic sets in and now the cortisol goes up and now that's only like
Yeah.
making things worse.
Yeah.
And
Well, it
then
also
you
doesn't
get in your
help that, like,
mind and you're
your
like,
grandma and your mom were like, "Oh, I started trying and we had kids instantly." I remember saying to someone I
right.
was worried because I was in my 30s,
Yeah.
and they're like, "We started trying in 2 weeks." It was like, "Okay, like, that's
Yeah.
not the
But they were
reality for
also probably
everybody."
20 years old, right? When like my
True.
mom was 20, I
True.
think, when she had her first child. So
Yeah.
again, very different lifestyle and different environment and
Mhm.
landscape that they were dealing
Mhm.
with. But now we know and we recognize that women don't cycle just once a month. It's a let's say 28 days, give or take a few days. It's a monthly cycle where every week our cycle is changing. And every week, our cycle is adapting to different changes in hormone levels. So, that first week, when we're on our menstrual cycle, our hormones are at their lowest. So, we're not going to feel ideal. Our estrogen is low, our testosterone is low, our progesterone is low. And a lot of women are very sensitive to that dip right before their period comes, which is where that PMS piece comes in. And again, PMS, common, not normal,
Yeah.
right? Very different terminology. But
Yeah.
it's during this time, you are going to feel more tired and you're not going to want to, do a bunch of stuff. That's normal. You're going to want to recluse on the couch and watch movies, and that's okay. Right? It's if you're crawling on the floor and not able to move,
Yeah.
and maybe then you're bleeding too much, there's maybe low iron, or you're in a ton of pain. Like obviously those are things you need to check on. But again, a little bit of mild cramping can be very normal. It tells you that your uterus is shedding, right? There's a very big physical change happening during your body during that time.
Mhm.
You're not going to feel amazing. But over the course of, a week or so, those hormones begin to climb. Estrogen will go up. Other hormones like luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, these are the hormones that are allowing your follicles to mature, right? So every month, I think of it as swimmers, right? Like a swim meet. All those swimmers line up at the beginning of the pool to race, right? So think about every month, we have, say, 14 to 20 eggs that line up and begin a race, okay? So during the follicle phase or follicular phase, those first 2 weeks of your cycle, as hormones are rising, all those follicles are swimming towards the finish line and they're getting larger and larger and larger as they do so, or they're maturing, okay? Only one of them will reach the end. And that's the follicle that's the largest, and that's the one that will eventually ovulate. Sometimes two, right? And if you get two and then they fertilize, you can end up with twins.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
at the end of this, so as you approach ovulation, ovulation is that end game, right? That when they get to the end. So that one follicle will then erupt and release an egg, right? And then present it to a potential sperm if it's there, and you can get pregnant during that window of time. You can get pregnant, 3 to 4 days leading up to that fertile day or that ovulation day, right? Because sperm can survive for up to 5 days. And then if it's presented with an egg during that window of time, you can get pregnant. After the egg has been released and gone through fallopian tubes or has disintegrated and gone, then no chance of pregnancy. So, or I say no chance, but there's always a chance. It's just, in general. So during this window of time, your hormones are rising. So you begin to have more energy, right? Testosterone goes up, estrogen goes up. You'll notice your skin become more clear, your hair look more luscious. You're like, wow, I look amazing. And nature
Yeah.
designed it this way because this is your most fertile time. This is the time when men are most
Mm.
attracted to women. You also feel very like sexy and
Yeah.
flowy
In
during this
flow.
window of time
Yeah.
in the flow, if you're in balance, right? Other women are like, I feel terrible during this time. And I'm like, okay, let's look at this then. But
Yeah.
then after that, progesterone gets a spike. Progesterone is our nice hormone that helps us feel relaxed. It helps us sleep. And then estrogen is high during this window of time as well. So estrogen and progesterone are both high during that luteal phase. During these last 2 weeks, there is this ratio of estrogen and progesterone that is ideal. And if it's off, so say estrogen is too high or progesterone is too low, which is very common, it seems like you have more cycling estrogen in the body, then you start getting more estrogen dominant symptoms. So this is where we see more PMS, more breast tenderness, cravings during that window of time, irritability, puffiness, bloating, because of that imbalance in estrogen and progesterone during that time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
again, when I teach girls this, especially young women, and they begin to understand that their phases of their cycle are different every week, then they
Yeah.
go, "Oh," and they realize, "Oh, I'm not broken." I understand why I'm more tired at this time in my cycle and or why I feel different energetically at a different time. And it's very normal to feel those different changes in energy
Yeah.
as long as they're not massive drastic changes that are affecting your life in a detrimental way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like a little bit of bloating is okay. Cravings are also normal. Changes in your sleep patterns can be normal as well. It's when they become so disruptive that you go, okay, maybe the balance is too much, or imbalance is too much, and we need to just maybe shift things a little.
Well, and I
But,
think it also means that the same thing you do in one week is not going to feel the same the next week. Like for
right.
me, I would go to even get steps in a day or go do a workout in one week. I'm thinking, okay, great. Like, let's go. I want to go heavier. And like, you're really like, you're so ready to go and you could run through a wall energetically.
Yeah.
And the next week you like, there's also this spiral where you go, oh my God, I'm not consistent. I'm not motivated. I'm not pushing. I'm not. And there's all these narratives and you're like, your body is physically going through it right now. So I
Mhm.
think for me, the empowering part when I learned it was understanding that like sometimes now when I'm having a week where I'm just like, okay, I'm not motivated or I'm feeling like I really want to sleep more or whatever it might be, I remember literally checking an app being like, oh, okay, never mind. It makes sense. Cause you start to
Yes.
just feel like you understand the correlation between your experience and just like
Yes.
what's happening within your body, to your point.
Yeah. And there's even times where you go to the gym and you're just like, you lay there and you don't do anything, right? You're just like, no, I'm just gonna sit for an
Yeah.
hour and
Yeah.
maybe you'll get in like 5 reps and be like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, to go
Yeah.
back to sort of the fertility piece and egg quality piece, because this is very important, is the way I look at fertility. Age is a factor for sure, but
Mhm.
it's not the end game, and fertility is not fixed. And this is what I want women to remember is that yes, as we age, and after the age of 35, we do see that the number of eggs that women have begins to decline, right? Like more drastically than before. And we do see that eggs begin to age. What I like to talk to my patients about and what I kind of coined is like this fertility 3.0. Okay, where instead of looking at egg count, because a lot of people do that, we look at egg
Mhm.
competence. Okay, so
Mhm.
the ability of that egg to grow, mature, ovulate, and implant and become a healthy pregnancy. So, what is the ability of your eggs to getting to that end game goal? And so, you can be 42 and have not a lot of eggs at all, but have very healthy eggs, right? And then you get pregnant. Maybe it takes a little bit longer because you have less eggs, but you get pregnant and you have a healthy pregnancy. Then I can have a 25-year-old where hormones are in the toilet. She has a lot of eggs, but the quality of them are not where they need to be. But the quality we can change. And a lot of people don't understand that is they think that, well, my fertility is what it is. So now I guess IVF is the only option, or I have to do an egg donor or something like that. Great options for some people, right? But why would you even go into a transfer for IVF or IUI or do any of that if you don't know about your own egg quality and work on that, or about your uterine environment? Because that's the second piece of it. So, egg quality is one piece, right? And we see that the competence of eggs or egg quality decline drastically because of the mitochondria within egg cells. So, our bodies have hundreds of mitochondria in their cells. Do you remember mitochondria from science class? It's like
Mhm.
that
I was
energy
gonna say this is
powerhouse,
bringing me back to high school. Yeah.
cellular energy, right? So
Yeah.
it's the energy powerhouse. But what science has discovered is that we have hundreds of thousands of mitochondria in egg cells. And they began to question why. And that's because our egg cells require so much energy to mature and ovulate and have menses and all these things. It requires so much energy. And then what they've noticed with fertility is that mitochondria and the health of that mitochondria was declining more drastically than, say, women B over here that has very healthy fertility and healthy mitochondria. So where the research is now focusing is into more cellular energy of the egg and boosting antioxidant support, getting mitochondria energy up, and that's going to help the quality of the egg, right? So the egg quality is one part of it. Sperm quality is obviously another part of that as well, because both partners need to make sure that the quality of both pieces are optimal. But then the uterine environment, which so many people forget about, is the second piece. You can have a beautiful egg and a beautiful sperm that come together, they fertilize, and then implantation just doesn't happen. Or implantation happens and God forbid there's a pregnancy loss. And we begin to question why that is. Other fertility clinics might just drive you right into the next round of IUI or next round of IVF. And I'm going, well, why though? Right? Or if you know you have endometriosis, right? You're working on egg quality, but why aren't you working on your uterine environment? Because when it comes to endometriosis, we know that the immune system piece and implantation piece is huge. And so we have to look at the lining of the uterus. Is there a low-grade inflammation in the uterus? Is there a bacteria there that is stopping pregnancy from happening? We know that ureaplasma and mycoplasma, two very common bacteria within the uterus, causes frequent miscarriages. I can count on my hand how many fertility clinics have actually tested it in patients before coming to see me. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's such a quick fix. Like if you find out that bacteria is there, you treat the bacteria, boom, you carry the baby to term. Meanwhile, there's women going through repetitive loss after loss after loss, and they're told, we don't know why, right? And that's because the amount of testing that these women are going through is so minimal. They do the same testing on everybody, and they do the same plan on everybody, and then they're diagnosed with unexplained infertility. And I go, well, they didn't even give you a full thyroid panel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't even look at your testosterone or your DHEA levels. Like, I'm very confused here of how you can be diagnosed with unexplained when you haven't looked at.
It's something I hear a lot. Like someone would say to me, oh, like they're saying I'm having fertility issues. I said, what are they due to? They're like, we don't know. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's
just
to your point, I think there's
investigated, right?
Yeah, and I think even to your point earlier, I'm sure that there's probably part of it, which for sure is that they're not seeking to understand these other factors. But there's also this other part, which I think is like, there's not, I would imagine, especially maybe in Canada, I'm saying this, but like a lot of funding around it, or there's not a lot of, people that are, it might not be the money making area potentially within the medical system. So as a result of that, it's like, okay, well, these are the things that we know we're going to put underneath like the IVF, for example, umbrella. And then I've seen a lot of women who have needed, like to your point, they're like, I'm taking this into my own hands. And so they end up in your office and are like, hey, I need to get a full workup done because I have no answers on this other side. So I do think it happens more than we think, where women just are told they're struggling with fertility, but there's not really a cause.
Right.
And I know even for me, I remember I had an appointment with someone and they said, well, like, are you thinking about having kids? And I was like, yeah, like, kind of need a partner to do that. I was like, yeah. They said, well, you just have to remember, like, you are going to be a geriatric pregnancy at
Oh
some
my
point
God,
here. So, like,
geriatric pregnancy.
I said, excuse me. I was like, this is not making me excited to have a child. So I remember, truthfully, when that got shared of like, you're getting older, I thought, okay, there's one thing to say, like, to your point, there's the natural, like, stats and the data that, to your point, the science is the science. There's nothing you can do once you hit 35. That's just a reality that you're going to be navigating. But I think you mentioned something, which I just like, I love everything you're sharing because it's so empowering. The aspect of the fact that you can take control of your egg quality, which I don't think basically anybody talks about, to be honest, because most conversations that I've had have always talked about, well, we can see how many eggs you have left. We can see how many eggs you have left. It's all about quantity. There's not really been a huge conversation around quality or preparing yourself for trying to conceive, whether you are someone maybe who, like, I know some people who do have a child right now, but they had a really hard time conceiving. So like they're thinking, okay, to try to have another one, what can I be doing in the interim? Or
Mhm.
potentially someone who says, I don't have any, but I want to use this time intentionally.
Yes.
For that like high achieving go, go, go woman, what are some things that maybe she needs to be thinking about or
Yes.
considering in this moment to kind of have her best chances of having the highest egg quality that she might be able to do on her
Yeah.
own?
Okay. I love that you asked this. And I do have a lot of women who come into my practice with that. And they're like, we're thinking about conceiving within the next maybe 2, 3 years. What could I be doing
Mhm.
now? So it's great because a lot of women are starting to think about it now earlier,
Yeah.
right? Where before it was more of a reactive response, like, well, now I'm pregnant. So I guess now I'm going to start eating well. And now I'm going to take the chemicals out of
Yeah.
my environment. And
Yeah.
so, what we could do now is what I always say as women approach their 30s, if they're thinking that they do want kids in the future, but they're not thinking like even next year, right? They're thinking, well, or some don't even have a partner yet, right? And they're like, well, I don't even have a partner yet. So, by the time I find a partner and then this and that, it could be like 35, 36, who knows? So, I always say, let's get a baseline, right? So, in terms of blood work, all of that, let's get a baseline of what your hormones are doing. Let's look at what your cycles look like. Let's look at your thyroid, your insulin, your iron levels, like all your micronutrients, right? See if there's any imbalances that we can correct now, right? Instead of later. Because there are things that can impact fertility down the line, like thyroid conditions, right? Big, big time. We talk about cycles. Are you having a monthly period? How long are you bleeding for? Do you recognize signs of ovulation? We look for that as well. And if the cycle is irregular, then we work on normalizing the cycle now. Are you on birth control? Do we need to go off birth control to sort of see what your hormones are doing and get yourself like cycling on your own? So we do a baseline kind of workup. And some women, I do say, why don't you do an anti-Müllerian hormone test, which will tell you about your egg count? Because that also gives us an indication of no, it doesn't tell me about the quality of your eggs, but it tells me about timeline a little bit. So
Mhm.
if you had a really low egg count, then we would have a conversation of, okay, either because we could work on the quality of those eggs for sure, but we also know that every year that number is going to keep declining naturally, right?
Mhm.
So if
Mhm.
you're only 30 or 31 now and we're already seeing a lower egg count, do we think about egg freezing, right? What are your thoughts around that? And, especially if it's really low, like we have conversations about that. Or if you are with a partner, maybe consider, let's consider maybe having a baby within the next year or two before this number really, really drops, right? Or we just keep an eye on it. Or you could come back with a really high egg count. Again, doesn't tell us about egg quality, but
Mhm.
it tells us, okay, we've got like years ahead of us here. So like
Mhm.
I tested last year. I'm not looking to have another baby, but I did test my anti-Müllerian hormone because I also think it's a sign of longevity in women. I
Mm.
really do think of fertility as like this fifth vital sign. And so I was just kind of curious, and my levels still came back in a really good range high. And I was like, oh, great. Like I'm really fertile still. And I have a lot of years ahead of me.
Yeah.
But if it
Yeah.
came back low, then I would know, okay, I mean, I'm not planning on another baby, but I would say, okay, maybe I'm going to go into menopause a little bit earlier than someone else,
Mhm.
or I
Mhm.
might start to feel perimenopause experiences sooner, right? So this
Mhm.
can give me an indication into like other pieces of health, not just fertility, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
so we get a baseline and that can kind of drive the further conversation. But if you're, say, not doing testing, even if you are, I always say clean up your diet, right? So yes, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the time you're eating well for your body, meaning an individualized approach, because not one diet fits all, right? So recognizing what foods are driving inflammation in you and remove those. And you probably already know what they are. Like if you eat pasta and you're bloated, or you have dairy and you're running to the washroom,
Dairy. Yeah.
if you eat sugar and you're getting acne, you know what foods are already driving inflammation. What we don't
Mhm.
want is for your body to be in an inflammatory state when you're trying to conceive, right?
Mm.
So, and it's not to say that you need to take out gluten 100% or you need to like do all that, but 80% of the time you're eating really clean, you're getting in good, healthy protein, lots of fruits and vegetables. 50% of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. You get in your healthy grains. I'm not about this carb free nonsense. We
Yeah.
need, we need glucose for our menstrual health, right? So,
Mhm.
lots of healthy fats for our reproductive system as well is really, really critical. Nuts and seeds, avocado, olive oil, very important. And then staying away from, processed foods, lots of sugar, alcohol, a lot of caffeine. It's okay to have a little bit, just not too much. That's going to like deplete your adrenals or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so from a dietary piece, getting that on track is very important. And then 20% of the time you can go out and have drinks with your friends or go out and have your pizza or your things.
Yeah.
But at home, you're pretty dialed, right? And that's a lifestyle shift. And it becomes easier once you've done it for a few weeks, right? Like taking out
And like,
junk. But
well, when someone tries to live within those guidelines,
mhm.
how long does it take typically, or how long would you want someone ideally to have runway wise to start to see or improve their egg quality? Because I'm
Yeah.
thinking if someone thinks to their, okay, I'm listening to this, feel like maybe I'm not living that way, decent
Yeah.
amount of alcohol, decent amount of
Yeah.
caffeine, lots of
Yeah.
sugar. Say if someone's maybe like, okay, I definitely have this as a goal of mine, but maybe I'm not living that way right now.
Mhm.
What would be a realistic timeline that you would kind of say to them, like, these changes are not, in the next 90 days. They're more from a systemic issue systemic
Mhm.
impact. You're going to start to see this show up or impact your egg quality in the next year, in the next 2 years.
Mhm.
Because
So
I know that the natural thing for everyone who listens is like, how fast can I do this and how
yeah.
quick can I see
Yeah.
results, right?
Yep.
So I do wonder, I guess, to like truly properly set expectations. This is not like, I would assume, like a quick fix. This is something that's more of an overall
Mhm.
holistic approach.
So it is an overall holistic approach because, and it all depends on how much you do. Like diet is just a piece of it, but you also need
Mhm.
to reduce your stress in your life, however that's going to look. Because trust me, once you fall pregnant, you're not going to be able to keep up with the same schedule. Or once you have your baby, you're not going to be able to keep up with the same schedule. But reducing stressors in your life that are no longer needed or that no longer serve you, detoxification, huge, right? Not only for just egg quality, but for the future of your child, right? We know that toxins and heavy metals pass from eggs and sperm into a fetus, and they are linked to diabetes, childhood leukemias,
Wow.
obesity, ADHD. So if we can pull those out ahead of time, that is ideal, right? So and that's just like three things I talked about. Obviously, there's other pieces. The other factor here is recognizing that some people may not have any reproductive condition at all. They're cycling very normally. They work out. They're generally very healthy. Your egg quality turnaround is going to be a lot quicker than somebody who's maybe dealing with endometriosis, PCOS,
Mm.
has diabetes, or has a higher BMI, things like that. So maybe for some
Mhm.
people, it's like, okay, we need to get you into a lower BMI, and that might take a few more months to get you to that level to
Mhm.
really see a change in your egg quality. However, what I can say is minimum 3 months. So it's not as long as you think. Minimum 3 months because the cycle of your egg is about 90 days, right? So the cycle for that egg to grow and mature and ovulate and everything like that is about 90 days. So if you were to get pregnant today, you're getting pregnant with an egg that is as healthy as you were about 3 months ago, if that makes sense. So 3 months
Mhm.
ago, you were smoking, you were drinking and binging with your friends on the weekend and all of that. Then obviously, your eggs are
Yeah.
going to represent that. But in 3 months' time, you can actually create quite a shift. I've had women go from having, and we know this because we were doing cycle monitoring through IVF. I've had people go through when they went in for retrieval, they only had, say, 6 eggs come up to bat. So then they canceled their retrieval because it wasn't enough, to going and having 14 eggs 3 months later, right? So
Whoa.
we know that these shifts can
Wow.
happen really quickly. For some people, of course, it does take longer, but we say minimum 3 months. At that point, too, the toxins should have been pulled out. So what we say is if you're not ready to conceive in 3 months, say it is, I mean, ideally, I would say a year, right? A year to really
Yeah.
make those changes, even in your home, right? Like get the chemicals out of your home, those terrible cleaning products, and like change up your
Yeah.
skincare to like really try and get like toxins off, like
Yeah.
those endocrine disrupting chemicals off your skin, out of your home. Very important, even for your partner, right? So I would say about a year, but minimum 3 months. But if you're not ready, if you're like, well, I'm probably not going to try to conceive for another 3 years, then what I would say is detox twice a year, right? And then you're never going to keep your diet 100%. It's unrealistic. We are human. Life happens. I'm not,
The
me
cake has
too.
to happen once in a while.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not. And what it just means is like, okay, maybe you've had a summer of more barbecues and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but then you recognize it
Yeah.
and then you get back on track, right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
Let it go. You're human. It's all good, right? And of course, if there's anything underlying, like if you know you have an autoimmune disease, if you know you have endometriosis or anything, right?
Any pre-existing
Any
condition kind of
thyroid
thing.
condition, just
Yeah.
get it all into balance before trying to conceive. That's all I say about that. But
Well, you said something that I'm kind of like, I had as a question selfishly coming into today.
mm,
And that was around perimenopause. Because when you
mhm.
said that you tested your egg count and you were like,
Mhm,
okay, great. It's a lot higher than, as
mhm.
high as I would want it to be. So that's amazing. But to your point, you mentioned that means that I might be not as close to going into, for example, perimenopause as I might have thought.
Yeah.
Great. I also know through just like research and nerding out on this that there's now women who are in their early 30s who are going into
Are
perimenopause.
they though?
And
Are they though?
uh, I don't know. That's why I was like, I'm going to selfishly ask her
Oh.
because I think for me or for anyone who's wanting to have a family
Yeah.
later in life,
Mhm.
okay, so I'm like, we're just dealing with all the labels. We got
Mhm.
perimenopause, we got geriatric
Yeah,
pregnancy, we
I
have all
know.
these,
All
you
the
know what I mean?
fear. There's
So
so
it's
much
just like so
fear.
much fear mongering.
Oh,
But
yes.
even with that aside, obviously there's the aspect of that, which is to your point earlier, something to consider if you're thinking about having a family.
Mhm.
But there's the other side, which is like, truthfully, like just in full ignorance, I always just assumed like when we hear anything menopause, many people think, okay, yeah, like a woman in her 50s.
Mhm.
Like, that's kind of the classic stereotypical experience of what we associate,
Yeah.
even with the word menopause. But when I started to see that there were literally articles of women who were like 33, 35, who were entering perimenopause, I thought, "Oh my god." So, I wasn't
Mhm.
sure, number 1, if this has kind of always been the case, again,
Mhm.
similar to fertility, as it's just maybe not been talked about. And someone listening, I'm sure, is like, "I'm not even ready for this conversation." But I'm curious, like, when is that really a reality
Yeah.
for women? Because the woman listening is either 25 to 45, and so we're kind of in this, to your point, getting educated about our
Mhm.
bodies. What does the woman listening need to know about perimenopause? And like, when is that kind of, I guess maybe in a range realistic for someone to experience?
Yes. So it is different for everyone. Like there are individuals who could be potentially 33 or 35 going through perimenopause because perimenopause is sort of this window of time that happens before full menopause, right? Before estrogen is low all the time and we're no longer having periods. That's defined as menopause, right? But if you were somebody, for example, who your mother went into menopause early or your sisters went into menopause, say at the age of 45, then you might go into that perimenopause phase earlier because perhaps you are also going to be into full menopause around the age of 45. It's not as common as you think, though, to go into full menopause around that time, right? It is usually closer to 49, 50, 51, 52. So I feel most of the time when women in their 30s are coming into me saying, I think I'm in perimenopause, they're not, right? So the beautiful thing about this becoming more of a conversation now is that women are feeling more heard. There's more research going into it. Doctors are recognizing it now and not brushing off women as much. So the conversation is so great, and that we're talking about it more, and it's becoming more recognized, and that women are feeling like, okay, there's a reason I'm feeling this way, and not just because, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of fear, like you said. And I know that even some of my colleagues are very guilty of this, of creating this fear that perimenopause is coming. Prepare yourself. Oh my God, you're gonna feel like complete shit and you should go on HRT
Yeah.
and like do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Okay, so number one, everybody going through perimenopause does not experience the same thing, right?
Mm.
It's also not the same amount of time. Some women could do perimenopause for about 5 years. Some women it is 10 years. Some women it's 7, some women it's 2. Perimenopause is a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning that you have to rule out every other thing first before you call it perimenopause. Okay? Because the symptoms of perimenopause look very similar to thyroid conditions, metabolic disorders, cortisol issues, and adrenal issues. And I can tell you that 9 times out of 10, when patients are, say, 35, 36, coming into me and they're going, well, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm irritable, and I have rage. And so my mood is changing like crazy. And I'm even noticing like my periods are more heavy now. I get their cortisol in check and all that goes away. And so then I go, see, you weren't in perimenopause, right? But it could be. So we do look at hormones. However, testing hormones during the perimenopause window doesn't make sense because you'll fluctuate monthly. So what's happening during perimenopause is progesterone is naturally declining and it's gradually going to keep declining during perimenopause. Estrogen declines as well, but you actually get more spikes, right? So 1 month it could be a little bit lower and then boom, it goes up and up and up. And so you're actually in this high estrogen state comparative to progesterone. So you get more estrogen dominant symptoms, right? But women can have estrogen dominance without being in perimenopause, which is, in terms of like a clinical diagnosis defined by your period changing plus or minus 7 days. So if you're used to a 28-day cycle and now you're having a 21-day cycle consistently or a 35-day cycle consistently, that's what a clinical diagnosis of perimenopause is. However, we're noticing changes and symptoms of perimenopause well before cycle changes. And what we're noticing first is that women are feeling more like their mood is changing. They feel off. Like a lot of women describe it as they just don't feel like themselves. Like they feel off. Their energy's really low. Their body's changing. So now they're seeing a lot more tummy, fat, or their arms are a little bit more like noodles. And it's such a bad way to say it. I shouldn't say it like that, but this is the way patients are describing it. And it's that your body's metabolism is shifting. So your body, the way your body is taking the food in and metabolizing that food is now you're holding on to fat more. We're creating more fat tissue, less muscle tissue, right? So we will see muscle begin to decline. So women start to see that where they're like, weird, I'm like kind of losing the muscles in my arm. I feel like I'm gaining in the middle and I'm not able to lose it. Like, what's going on here? And they haven't changed their workouts. They haven't changed what they're eating. And that's just because the metabolism is changing. That landscape of the woman is changing. Perimenopause is not to be feared. You're still fertile during perimenopause, right? You're still cycling every month. You're likely still ovulating every month. The way you just feel is different, right? And the way your brain is responding to your ovary changes. So it's not that your body's broken. It's not that it's something to be fixed. It's a transition and it's a recalibration of the woman's neurological system. So the way, again, the brain is responding to the ovaries. So when we look at perimenopause as a recalibration, then we begin to look at it through this lens of more empowerment and less fear. And just being like, okay, obviously what my body needs right now is not the same that it needed when I was 20, right? Or even in my early 30s. So maybe the foods I'm eating now are not serving me, and I need to find out what foods now are good for me. I need to focus on maybe more bodybuilding and less cardio in the gym. I need to keep my protein and food timing regulated. I need to make sure I'm nourishing my body. I need to make sure I'm resting and that I have energy because the perimenopause experience requires so much rest and energy, right? But again, we need to work, we need to mother, we need to do all the things, and we're pushing through perimenopause. So you had a comment of, was this something we always dealt with, or are we just recognizing it more now, or, what's going on? We are recognizing it more now. I think it is something we've always dealt with. But I think the way women are experiencing perimenopause now is very different than the way women used to, which because we live in the cortisol era. And when cortisol is high and the adrenal glands are not supported, perimenopause symptoms will always be worse, right? If women have insulin that is dysregulated, so more insulin resistance because maybe they're not sleeping well or they're not eating for their bodies and eating well, then which obviously happens during times of stress, right? Then PMS gets worse and perimenopause experience worsens as well. So when we are working with perimenopause, we're not just working with hormones here. Like we're really working on like changing lifestyle and nutrition, making sure gut health is supported, making sure you're sleeping. We're making sure cortisol is regulated out. and stress is coming down so that that perimenopause experience isn't so severe. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And we
No,
also need to
100%.
protect like our brain and our heart and our bones, which is a big conversation in perimenopause as well. But I think that a lot of women think they're in perimenopause because of the symptoms they're experiencing mimic it, but you
Mm.
have to make sure it's nothing else first before you just say, "Oh yeah, it's perimenopause." Because again, by just saying it's perimenopause, you're brushing it off, if that makes sense.
Well, I think it honestly all ties together so well. So I like your analogy of it being like a web is just so obvious now after
Mhm,
everything you've explained, because even as you said, like stress. Okay, so your cycle impacted by stress, impacted by, for example, your diet impacted by stress.
mhm,
And then women are also seeing fertility, egg quality impacted by lifestyle factors and
mhm,
stress. We're seeing all of these different areas that all seem to have the same tie back to them.
mhm,
But the interesting thing is that the kind of new reality for women has been established. And so, to your point, where, okay, well, we have to take care of the kids, we have to go to work, like these realities still exist. But if you don't have, based off what I'm hearing of everything today, if you don't have that information of what's going on underneath the hood, if you're just looking at, okay, great, like we're seeing this light go off, great, let's deal with that. If you don't really understand like the full machine underneath, I could see a woman, no question, trying to deal with the egg issue, the stress issue,
mhm.
the anxiety issue, the gut issues. And then they feel like they're this ongoing project
Yes,
of never feeling finished or never feeling complete.
right.
And not to mention, that's at a static point that she might be dealing with today, let alone, okay, great. Well, then in the next 5 years, your body's going to change again and you're going
Mhm.
to have new symptoms come up. And you go, great, my gut issues are back. And now I have depression. And now I have, right. And so it's
Mm,
this constant, I feel like, flares of symptoms that naturally for women
mhm,
without understanding that root
mhm.
are going to constantly be trying to navigate and
Yeah,
deal with
yeah.
versus like everything you shared today. I think to myself, if someone actually understood their hormone levels, if they actually understood the history that they come from and how that influences them, if they actually understood their own individual response right now with cortisol and how
Mhm.
is that showing up in their life versus just, oh, this is always how I am. I just always have struggled to sleep and
Right.
minimizing that. If it's like you tie in the mental health conversation, the thing that I think is so empowering from today is like all the things that women are navigating in whatever symptom, whether it is, their gut, their cycle, mental health, fertility, all of it,
Mhm.
all the answers are there
Yes.
if you actually have someone to look at the whole picture
Mhm,
versus just the one puzzle piece that
mhm,
they're responsible for. And I think that that's exciting because what it means, like, I really believe education is so empowering, which is why I think I nerd out on so many different things, like get educated, because once you understand, I think it puts you back in the driver's seat. And I think hearing today, even for me listening, is like, this is so empowering for someone to realize that your reality as a woman is going to shift
mhm,
and change. And
mhm,
that's based off lifestyle factors, your hormones, your age,
mhm,
all of these things.
mhm.
But if you actually have this information and know what to constantly tune in with, you will understand what's happening with you. And therefore, as a result, based off what you're saying, understand how to navigate it and basically what to do next.
Right. And I think it can be very overwhelming, like especially with all the information out there, right? Like getting educated is so great, but it can be so overwhelming because you have
Yeah.
so many people out there saying different things and conflicting things and you don't know what to do. And so to have that person to just look at you as an individual and be like, "Okay, well, maybe this isn't right for you." Like for example, fasting, I get questions about that a lot. Fasting is not right for you because this, or it could be
Mhm.
right for you because of this reason. But I think what women need to understand is that it can feel overwhelming at times because you feel like there's a lot happening in your body. There's a lot of symptoms going on, and you almost feel like you're like, wow, where do I even start? But I would say
Mhm.
where you start is listening because don't be afraid of symptoms. It's your body trying to tell you something, and you've just been ignoring it. You've been pushing it aside
Yeah.
for a very long time. So
Yeah.
often I
Yeah.
ask patients, well, what do you think is at the root of this? And they already know. You do, you know, and they get quiet and they go, "Oh, well, I have this going on, and I know that this is a big piece of it right now." Or they go, "Oh, I eat so much sugar, and, like, I just don't wanna, like, break up with sugar. I don't wanna break."
Yeah.
It's like they know what to
Yeah.
do. Sometimes they just like even me, sometimes I know what to do, but I have a naturopath myself and I'm like, I need you to
Yeah.
just tell me what to do. But you do have this intuitiveness that I feel like women have just disconnected from so much. And it's so powerful because like you ever have somebody tell you something of like, well, I think you need to eat this way or you need to take this supplement or you need to do this and then you sit with it and you go, I don't know. I don't, it doesn't resonate with me. Like, I don't feel like
Yeah.
I should be doing that
Yeah.
because, and you need to listen to that intuitiveness. And like, I'll even have patients who come to me and be like, you know what? I started these supplements, but I didn't take this in because I just felt like it was too much or I didn't need it or I just felt off when I had it. And I was like, okay. And I don't force them to take it. I go, great,
Yeah.
listen to that because your intuitiveness is more powerful than anything. It's the same with motherhood, right? So listen to your bodies and, work is there, of course, life is there, but there has to be time where you're connecting to your body, right? And we just fail to do that so much.
And to your point, I think starting today is like if you don't do it on your own time, it usually is something that becomes something on your to-do list because it's been
Mhm.
forced in that
Yep.
way. Like I think my burnout flares were going, my stress factors were going long before I had heavy symptoms and ended up like in someone's office.
Yeah.
But that was because I physically like was like I can't function. Like it was at a point where my body was like, okay, well if you're not going to listen, then we're going to stop you. And I think that as women, it shouldn't need us to be completely halted in a certain area
Mhm. Mhm.
before looking at this. And I think one of the parts of health in general is that many people don't, I think, take enough of a perspective of being proactive, which to your point today, like there's so much you can do in a proactive nature. We don't necessarily need to have to get to a place of struggling with fertility before we start to ask these questions.
Yeah.
Or we don't need to start to, get to a place of being completely burnt out before we ask, okay, it's so weird. I actually haven't been sleeping for like 3 weeks.
Mhm.
So I think it's also like for me, my motto with health, which was kind of the core of what I'm now in, is just like getting curious to your body, getting curious to your symptoms, getting curious about, to your point, information that's out there and like take what lands, maybe leave what doesn't. But I think even just to your point, like tuning in, getting curious,
Mm.
the crazy part is to your point, like when I was stressed and they're like, so tell me about your lifestyle. And I'm like, oh my God, am I gonna have to tell her about my 4 coffees today? Like I don't
Nobody
know.
ever wants to because they're
So
afraid that the practitioner is gonna tell them they can't have it, right? But
yes. Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah, to your
Exactly.
point, it's about investigating. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Don't have no fear, right? Let the fear go around fertility, around aging, around perimenopause. Let it go. Use
Hmm.
it as an
Hmm.
opportunity to get to know your body, get to know as
Yeah.
much as possible, because that is
Yeah.
so empowering. And then you're going to know what serves you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Today was a master class in women's
Ah,
health. So good. I'm like, I'm gonna come back and listen to this because it's
oh,
just so good.
I feel like we could talk
Um,
forever. It's
No, totally, totally. I'm like, part 2, part 3.
oh,
And there's so much. I just wanna fully just be transparent, you guys. Like, if you go to Jess's stuff, there's so much too that we did not even get into. Like,
mhm.
we didn't even touch deeply on metabolism today. Like, there's so many other things that you are connected to this that I know many of you are interested in. So with that being said, Jessica, if someone obviously wants to just learn more about what it is that you do, potentially even work with you privately, or just, yeah, like
Mhm.
learn more in extension of today's conversation, where is the best place for them to reach out to you, for them to find you?
Yeah, so the best place would be through my website. I mean, my website is very fertility focused. Obviously, I see everything from and women's
Mhm.
health and even in men's health. And I do some longevity and detoxification and digestion and all the things. So my website is very heavily focused on fertility. However, you'll find out a lot about me there and, who I am, my journey, but also how to connect with me. I have my online programs through there as well. So I have some online fertility programs that are very easy for couples to navigate and follow, but very evidence based and intuitive based and has some great information. If you can also connect with me through Instagram, I would say it's probably not the best way to book an appointment. That would definitely be, emailing me through my website.
Yeah.
However, if you're looking for just a lot of tips and information, I put a lot out on my Instagram account, and I'm sure you'll link that in the show notes.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's where I am probably most of the time. Like I don't think I've updated my website, and I don't even know how long. Again, something else on the to-do list. But it's unfortunately on the back burner at the moment. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, today was so, so good. And I highly recommend, even just as a side note, guys, if you're you're listening to this and you're like, this part of the conversation really landed for me, or that was an insight that I really needed, or that was something I'm really surprised that I learned. I also just want to invite you, if you even just want to send Jess a DM on Instagram and say, hey, I was listening to the show. This landed for me. This was a piece I didn't know. As always, when we're able to kind of like be witness in the breakthrough, I really do think that it lands on such a deeper level. So with that being said, today was so good, Jess. Thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to come back and listen, and obviously love every part of this show. So thank you so much for having me. It was awesome. It was great.
Thank you. I have a lot of girls I need to share this with now. So
Oh.
please be, as a last piece, feel free to open and share this with anybody else in your world as well, who maybe is a woman who's dealing with any of the things that we navigate today. We talked all things women's health, and I don't think there's probably a single woman in your world that doesn't need to listen to this conversation. So feel free to share that as well. But with all that being said, we'll see you on next week's episode. And as always, stay ambitious.